Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Dennis Carlson, the host of the Partnership Series here on B2B Growth and founder of Agency Leverage. I am joined today by Andy Hutter. Andy is the Director of Partnerships at Beam Dental. Andy, how are you today?
I'm great, Dennis. Thanks for having me.
For sure. I'm excited to talk to you, Andy. Beam Dental is fairly new on the scene as far as dental insurance companies go. And I think you guys have been around just a couple of years now. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. The company's been around since about 2012, but we've only entered the employee benefits space a little over 2.5, almost 3 years ago now at this point. So still a relatively new player on the scene.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of folks from the carrier side coming into the market. More and more maybe in the past year or so, but historically we've kind of had just a handful to look at in that market. So I'm curious if you can just give us an overview on who Beam Dental is, where you fit into the landscape for employers, and then of course what you do over at Beam Dental.
Sure thing. So Beam Dental is a employee benefits provider, really carrier, and we specialize in dental. Obviously, that's our bread and butter, but we also offer vision through a partnership with VSP, and we're working to add a suite of LiDi products to kind of round out that offering of ancillary employee benefits. Our sweet spot is pretty down market, so we say 2 to 250, but the majority of our book is probably under 100 lives. We know that, as many do, that's an underserved market. What we've been able to do as a dental carrier, a newcomer to the scene in that space, is bring like a tech-first approach to it. And that tech-first approach touches everything that we do. So it's not just member enrollment and modern experiences with the mobile app and digital insurance cards and all that kind of stuff, but also all of our technology behind the scenes. Our underwriting model is pretty powerful and proprietary. Our enrollment tech that we've built in-house, and our claims processing tech, because we're also the claims processor or the TPA. Everything that we've done is tech first, and we have a distinct advantage because we're able to do that, right? A lot of the incumbents in the space, to their credit, they're huge, but they've also been around for a long time, and their companies were built on processing paper and individual enrollment forms and everything that comes along with starting to sell insurance 100 years ago. And they've all worked really hard, and some have done a pretty good job of digitizing their business. Beam has the distinct advantage of starting from that digital first footprint. And what that allows us to do is be really efficient, hyper competitive with our pricing, because we can control our total cost to serve in a variety of interesting ways. But getting back to the Beam Dental product itself, pretty straightforward, standard PPO dental employer benefits. So think of us like a competitor to Guardian or to Delta or to Principal, because that's exactly what we are. And you can really think about Beam in 3 distinct layers, and I kind of build it up like a pyramid. The first layer is that traditional PPO dental insurance product, fully insured, rich standard benefits like no missing tooth clause, and implants are covered by default, and we provide night guards for teeth grinding, kind of the sort of the bells and whistles features of a dental insurance plan that sometimes aren't included in the basic plans from some of our competitors, and we do that on purpose just to try and make the product really easy to consume, so you don't get caught with some gotcha scenarios. And that's the first layer, competitively priced and pretty straightforward. The second layer is enabled, or comes in the form of our Beam Perks program. And Beam Perks is this hardware component that gets attached to our traditional dental insurance. And that comes with the Beam brush, which is a battery-powered sonic brush that is Beam's device. We designed it, we manufacture it, we own the patent on it. We are manufacturing, assembling, shipping, and fulfilling, so we're completely vertically integrated. This sonic battery-powered brush, and then also Beam toothpaste, floss, replacement heads for the brush itself, and then batteries for the brush itself. And that whole package is called Beam Perks. And perks are delivered to every single member that has Beam Dental Insurance if they opt into the program. It's a completely optional, voluntary program, but if they say that they would like the Beam Brush and the Beam Perks program, then we send it to every member in the family at no additional cost. And
Wow.
we do that for a pretty simple reason. It's preventative wellness. It's a wellness program. What we know is that if you give members the tools they need to take better care of themselves, whether it's Aetna providing a Fitbit and encouraging 10,000 steps a day, or something else, that those members do end up taking better care of themselves. And what that actually ends up doing is lowering risk in the form of claims exposure to the insurer eventually. So there's an altruistic component, and then there's also a practical business component. The members get something out of it. A lot of people don't switch from a manual brush to a electric brush unless they're given one. And that Perks program is probably the core unique value prop for Beam. Then it enables the third layer, so building up that pyramid. Standard benefits, Perks program, the second layer. And then the third layer is the ability to control or actually lower the group's premium at renewal based on the average brushing behavior of the group. And that's called the Beam Smart Premium Discount. And it is a behavior-driven pricing engine, which is completely novel to the dental space. And it's enabled by the Perks program. So the brush actually sends back some anonymized, aggregated data to Beam, and we can look at it at the group level. Again, this is an individualized program. There's no names attached to data. There's no weird Big Brother thing happening here. It's very much a group level wellness program that allows the group as a whole to control their cost at renewal. So really what we do is we can look at first year behavior, and then we can extrapolate and project from there that the group will probably have decent or lower claims exposure in year 2 and year 3. And of course, that's the trick. We have to keep them for year 2 and year 3. But if we can, then what Beam does is we take that projected savings and we can actually pass some of it back to the form of pass some of it back to the group in the form of that discount at renewal at the group level. So that's about as succinctly as I can summarize
Sure.
Beam value prop, with a little bit of detail baked in there, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know probably people don't spend a lot of time thinking about their dental insurance, and most of us just go to the dentist and hope that all of it or most of it is covered, and then hopefully take good care of our teeth. So it sounds like you guys have really integrated more into not just what happens in the dental office, but what also happens at home, which seems like a pretty unique value proposition for both the employees at a company and certainly the employer, who's probably usually sponsoring a big portion of that bill. So I want to get into the meat today, which is talking about partnerships and your role. So dental insurance, to many of us, is probably not the most exciting topic to think about. Certainly that market isn't something that people are, clamoring to get into typically. There's a lot of incumbents. You mentioned a couple of big names, but we all know Snoopy and MetLife, and, many of us know Guardian, and of course, Delta Dental, huge dental insurance provider. And along comes Beam. And your job is to create partnerships to sell Beam into employer groups. Talk a little bit about your approach entering a market with so many incumbent legacy big brand name players, and how you as the director of partnerships start building those relationships.
Sure. So partnerships at Beam is probably a misnomer. It really is this hybrid of business development and the responsibilities that come with traditional BD, but we focus those energies towards distribution partnerships. And the simplest way to explain that is that my team's job, our job is to put the Beam product in front of as many employee benefit decision makers as possible, as fast as possible. So my team isn't the direct sales, right? We have a sales force that calls on brokers and producers. So another phrase that you could use for what we do is sales enablement. And right now our guns are pointed at three different channels or three different categories within that sales enablement stack. And the biggest is probably the InsurTech or the BenTech category. We also focus on building our national brokerage relationships. So the Aons and the Hubs and the One Digitals and the Gallaghers of the world. And then also we look at and partner strategically with some of the next gen general agencies. If there's a specific territory that maybe we don't want to put, sales specific effort into, we can leverage a GA in a more traditional way. But by far the largest of those three categories is the InsurTech and the BenTech segment, kind of two halves of the same coin.
What are some of the big name InsurTech providers, just for my benefit and for our audience's benefit? Who are we talking about when we're talking about those folks?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on your market segment. So if you're, any of your listeners are in the 2,000, 2,500 and up, employer space, they're going to know names like Benefit Solver or Benefit Focus, bswift, big platforms that can be white labeled or can be customized to become basically the benefits sort of HR management system of record for employee benefits for that large employer. That's not the market that we play in. So down market, it becomes more fractured and there's more players because the sophistication of the technology doesn't have to be so large because you're supporting 2,000 plus employees. So down market in the 2 to 250 range, there's a handful of folks. Employee Navigator is a Ben admin and enrollment system that we work with. Ease, formerly Ease Central, pretty well known, more on the West Coast than the East Coast, but pretty well known. And then there are some players that span the group size spectrum. So bswift, usually mid-market, that's a preferred engine of NFP, which is a big international agency. And literally dozens, if not hundreds, of other Ben admin and enrollment tools and platforms. So what my job is, and my team's job is, to figure out creative B2B distribution relationships. And when you're working in an ancillary employee benefit space like dental, which is very much a commoditized space, as a new entrant to that market, full of lots of legacy incumbents, you got to get creative in the way that you put your product in front of your clients. So, Beam has this unique value prop, and we're investing heavily in sales and outbound, but that's only going to take us so far, right? And those two things are really just table stakes anymore. So, the real challenge for our team and for the business broadly is wading through this sea of InsurTech and all of the different providers and software layers and quoting platforms and Ben admin platforms that producers use, and finding that best fit and the best bang for the buck for Beam.
And so what does that look like? Really practically walk me through maybe if you want to mention a platform by name, go ahead, or just refer to it as a platform, but walk me through what actually moves the needle for Beam Dental in one of these tech enabled partnerships.
Sure. So good BD involves a lot of time spent just keeping up with the market. And that might sound obvious, but it needs a really purposeful effort. In my world, there used to be only one or two paths to the employee benefits decision makers, and that one of those two paths was the producer, the insurance agent. There's now dozens, if not more, because of this explosion of the InsurTech landscape. And that landscape's really dynamic. So finding that most efficient path from whoever sells the majority of your industry's product to the purchaser of your industry's product that's the trick, right? So tactically, what that looks like for Beam is kind of trying to map out this workflow, this spectrum. And imagine that you and the thing that your company sells is on the far left of the spectrum, and the decision maker who's ultimately buying the product is on the far right. So think about who sits between you and your product and that decision maker. It's different per industry, of course, but generally speaking, there's some type of broker, like an actual broker, in my case, insurance broker, or there's resellers, there's tech distribution products, there's service providers. Are there any automation layers? So you got to try and map the spectrum and look at the whole journey. So, how does the product move through the whole industry? And then, what those tactics look like for Beam, at least, is continuously researching that ever changing landscape and then identifying the partners that share market fit. And market fit can mean mutual target client size, right? So I mentioned, the benefit solvers and the benefit focuses of the world. Those guys are admin tools that are upmarket. They don't really align with Beam. We know that they exist, but they're not necessarily going to be an ideal client or partner of Beam's just because of that market misalignment. The market fit could mean physical geography. If we were focused on, California, for example, we're really only going to worry about the players that are in California. And again, that sounds obvious, but it takes a purposeful effort to understand that. Other tactics include establishing a tech connection with those companies, whether it's just a, plain regular enrollment feed, or whether it's some type of quoting API that allows those producers to enable some self-quoting capability through that platform. So the last thing that we do is prioritize and assess the partners that once we've identified them, what order should we work with them in? And we do that by finding alignment in what creates value for the customers of both companies. So who's our customer? Our customer is the employee and the employer, but also our customer is the producer that's putting Beam in front of the decision maker or making the decision in some cases. We look for ability of that platform to lower Beam's customer acquisition cost. So if our sales team is targeting a $70 per life acquisition cost, I actually don't know exactly what it is. I'm not on the sales team, but say hypothetically, if they're targeting a $70 customer acquisition cost, my job is to go find partners that can bring in customers to Beam lower than that, in most cases, significantly lower than that because of the tech enablement portion of it. We look for partners that have a presence in a frontier market. So if you and your company are expanding into a new physical territory or into a new industry or into a new group size segment of the industry, there are players that specialize in those different those different niches, right? So you might go enter the 250 and up space, and your partners are going to be different. You might go attack the Pacific Northwest as a physical geography. Your partners are going to be different. And last but not least, we look at the ability of a partners to hold down our administrative overhead. We measure this in the form of total cost to serve, commonly referred to as total cost to serve. And that's everything post-sale. What does it take to support and service those customers, in our case, insured individuals? And what can they do to help hold down our administrative overhead?
Wow. So there's a lot of factors that go into selecting partners. And in the end, you mentioned earlier that this boils down to really being sales enablement for your outside sales force. So when you're putting together these partnerships, you're not necessarily able to see the value until that sell through is done from your sales reps through most likely it sounds like everything's still going through a broker channel and the employer makes the decision. So you're a couple of layers back, really trying to see into the future and see how what you're doing is going to really impact that ultimate sale. And then of course the employee actually has to enroll in the end. Is that all fair to say that that's kind of the path
Yeah, that's all fair. It makes my job challenging to measure ROI to the business, but it also makes my job really fun because I get to pull all of these different levers and see what works. Yeah, and we're not going into these partnerships and these deals with any lack of sophistication, right? I mean, they're as careful and robust as our vetting and prioritization criteria are. So too is our process for putting together the right type of B2B deal that is mutually beneficial, that forecasts out where our break even point is on the relationship. There might be an initial upfront investment in the form of actual cash, or just in the form of time and labor for our team to stand up that relationship. And we need to know, okay, when are we going to get that back? And how are we going to get that back? How fast are we going to get that back? You know, we see that, we can measure that in a couple of different ways, but the most obvious is if a partner opens up sales opportunity to 1,000 brokers, we know that 1,000 brokers are selling on average, let's say those brokers are selling 50, dental deals a year each. Maybe that's high. These are just hypothetical numbers. I'm not looking at our actual model. But let's say if, they're selling 50 deals a year, maybe Beam can win 10% of those. So then we get 5 from each. So now we're at, let's say we convert a half of those brokers and they're selling 10% of their book to Beam, or rather they're selling Beam as 10% of their book. Then we're looking at 500 times 5. Okay. That's a meaningful number. And then what's the average deal size that comes in through that block, that book of business that was enabled by this one particular partner? So it's really they become relationships of leverage where my team can go work through a low customer acquisition cost partner because of automation. And through that one relationship, my team can introduce Beam to 1,000 brokers or to 10,000 employers, which are 50,000 eligible lives, and some of them are enrolled. So it's a long tail, as you described, but usually it's worth it. These deals take 3, 4, sometimes 6 or more months to put together, and then you really don't see measurable data that can prove ROI and hopefully validate your hypothesis until at least another 6 months, because you have to build traction, people have to enroll, and then you have to measure value thereafter. But to me, that just means a little bit of job stability, right? Because
Sure.
we get to do bigger picture, longer term strategic initiatives and hopefully provide meaningful value to the business in the process.
Yeah, well, and it makes a lot of sense to really focus in on those distribution partners when you see how it can really impact the long term, not just lowering cost of customer acquisition, but also just the distribution, just the availability of the product. And to that point, I assume your job and your department's job doesn't end once the integration, again, if we're talking about a tech enabled partner, once the integration is done, once the deal is signed, and they say, "Yep, now you're on our platform, and we're going to make it easy for people to access the Beam product through our platform," you're still competing, right?
Right.
You're not the only dental plan on the platform or dental option on the platform. So, just as we wrap up, talk to me a little bit about how you continue enabling that for whether it's for your outside sales team, employee benefits brokers, and then for the employees too. Where is partnerships involved in that final part of the sale?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I'm explaining to our internal staff here what partnerships does, because it's sort of this black box to a lot of the rest of the business, I explain it as this full spectrum team that does everything from the industry research and the targeting plans, to identify who the partners are, all the way through, financial modeling and contracting, and then technical implementation to, the end of that spectrum being internal training, and then also ongoing strategic account management for that partner, so that we continue to extrapolate, or extract, I should say, value from that relationship. And it goes both ways, right? We need Beam to be continuing to provide value to the partner, otherwise the partner's not going to continue to care. But also we need the partner to provide value to Beam. And one of the ways that we do that is through internal and external education after that partner is quote unquote launched. And that's actually a purposeful role and separate set of responsibilities on our team, is what we call program management. And that involves the initial and then the ongoing education for who that partner is, what the partner will do for Beam, the value that the partner will bring to the business, and both external and internal facing, right? So we bring in a new platform partner, Beam's on that platform, great. It doesn't matter if the brokers don't know about Beam. They're not necessarily going to, be browsing through Employee Navigator and just happen to see Beam and say, "Oh, I've never heard of this product. Let me recommend it to my client." That's not a thing that happens.
Right.
So we need to educate our sales reps that Employee Navigator is now a pathway to Beam, so that if they're out talking to producers in the field, and the producer happens to mention one of the 10 or 12 tech partners that we have in place, then that sales rep knows exactly what that means. They know how to talk about it. They know how to communicate the value prop of that platform or multiple platforms to that producer, so that the producer feels more confident and comfortable not only in Beam's product but in Beam's professional capabilities, because they understand then that we get it. We know how to talk their language, and we've worked really hard to put ourselves where they are in their day-to-day, so that the platforms they're using to manage their livelihood, their book of business, Beam has worked hard to let them continue to do that, and also provide them an innovative product at the same time that they can continue to earn and retain their own clients with. So backing up a little bit, that program management role that we have on our team is what continues to enable that internal and external education and training, and then they become a primary point of contact for questions go forward after the launch of that relationship. And then we also have separately an analyst role that helps build out our QBRs, so quarterly business reports, reviews, whatever your acronym is, that we provide to our partners on a quarterly basis go forward to really extrapolate, or I keep saying extrapolate, to really extract some value from the relationship for both parties. So an example of this would be, let's say with a partner, we have 1,000 groups together mutually. It's not huge, but it's significant, and it's enough to actually analyze and study together. So, we spend a couple of days at the end of every quarter just looking at the numbers and trying to pull out trends. One thing that Beam does that I think is relatively unique among carriers, at least dental carriers, is we put a disproportionate amount of time and effort into these QBRs, so that we can go to a partner and say, "Hey, we're going up and to the right. It's great. Everything looks wonderful. We're both growing. We're both making more money. Isn't it wonderful?" But we drilled in per state, and we noticed this concerning dip in this state. And this state is our second largest state together. And if we hadn't looked at that individual state and the trends in that state, it would have been hidden just looking at, all 50 states stacked on top of one another. And taking the time to go that one extra step beyond in this sort of account management and analysis role provides real meaningful business insight and value that a lot of our partners just aren't getting from their other health carrier partners, certainly not dental, at least not that we've seen so far. So that's one way that the role, trying to come back around to your question, it's one way that the role in our team's role in the business is to continue to foster and provide that value both internally and externally. And it doesn't just end as soon as the contract is signed and the tech is integrated.
Yeah. Sounds like in some ways the work is just beginning when that contract is signed.
Very much so.
Yeah. Well, Andy, this has been really informative. I really appreciate you taking all the time to talk with us today. If someone is interested in diving deeper on partnerships with Beam Dental, just getting in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Sure. So the best way to reach out is probably to our partnerships email, which is partnerships, exactly how it sounds, partnerships@beam.dental. Little confusing email, beam.dental. There's no .com there.
Okay.
So welcome any questions or thoughts. And honestly, we don't pretend to be experts here. We're just learning how the industry is moving, and trying to keep up and trying to make forward-leaning decisions at the same time. So we are an open book, and we also welcome the opportunity to learn from others. So if anybody has any tips or tricks and things that have worked well for them, we'll always take the insight.
That's fantastic. Well, Andy, thank you. This has been great.
Thanks so much, Dennis.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.